Welcome to the K Plus J Living Podcast,
where we talk about designing a meaningful home, better health, and more happiness.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 7 of the K Plus J Living Podcast. And hey, in this week's episode, we're going to be talking about how to win every argument with your spouse. I win every argument, don't I?
Yeah, I was going to say this is your podcast. I don't know.
Well, yeah. Yeah, so we're actually joking. You know, that title is a hook, but you know, we kind of unpack our week before we get into this podcast. It's been last week we didn't get a podcast released like we normally do. We are, and here's why. We've been working on, here's some upcoming things. We have this thing called the Iowa Gathering that's coming up June 24th in DeWitt, Iowa. And we've just been working a ton.
We're super excited about it.
Yeah.
But, yeah, we're working around the clock to get our booth ready.
Yeah. There's just a lot of...
And it's been the end of the school year, which means we've had... You know, we talked last time about the band concerts, then it was plays, and it's just been like...
It's been fun.
Every day.
Yeah, it's been
good,
fun. It's just the end of the year. There's
crazy.
Just a lot of school stuff, a lot of... So with that thought, you know, before we get into this thing about how to win every argument, I wanted to just touch base on just margin. That and what I mean by margin is, you know, on this podcast, we talk about 3 pieces, you know, how to design a meaningful home, better health, and more happiness. And so just when it comes to more happiness, one of the biggest things that brings happiness in our lives is having a life that has margin in it. And what we mean by margin is that your schedule isn't so jam-packed that you can't breathe or you don't have flexibility. And sometimes there's seasons of life where things are more busy than normal. And in order to do that, you have to say, okay, in order to keep my sanity, what can I say no to? And we love this podcast. We love recording a podcast, but we knew end of the school year, getting ready for this, that something had to give. Because when we normally, the night that we normally record our podcast was booked and full, and then the rest of the week we had school, family stuff, and we just kind of talked and said, okay, no podcast this week. And so what do you need to say no to, and what are the things in your life that maybe if you're running crazy that you can say no to? So there was that. Also, you hear us talk about our boxers a lot, and this past week, our oldest dog, Bo.
We had a sad day.
Yeah, we had to put Bo down for lots of different reasons, but so it was just a tough week. And now we have our other boxer here behind us.
She's whining because she wants to sit on our lap.
She wants to sit on our lap as we talk. So, how awesome is that? So she's going to go outside and play. Jennifer's taking her outside to play right now. So if we were doing videos, it'd be great. So Jennifer just tripped over the top of our dog. That was pretty amazing. So how was that? Did you have a good trip?
That was ridiculous. She about killed me.
Did you pack your bags?
No.
So let's get into our topic for this week, which is how to win every argument with your spouse. And here's what we mean. Jennifer and I have arguments. The arguments that we have today are not the kind of arguments we had years ago when we were first married. We've grown in our marriage, grown in communication. But one of the first things that we adopted really from the Bible is where it says, do not let the sun go down on your anger. Why don't you kind of touch on that?
Well, so the funny thing about this is I knew that this was the topic for our next podcast, and we just hadn't done it yet. But I was talking to a coworker this week, and we actually had kind of a funny conversation because she was talking about an argument that she had with her husband, and she said, you know, I know you're not supposed to go to bed angry, but she's like, I was just too tired. And so we were kind of laughing that there should be a caveat to that says don't argue tired, and that if you get into the argument at like 9 o'clock at night, you probably do need to go to bed on your anger because you're not going to get anywhere.
Well,
on it.
and plus, the scripture verse says, "Don't let the sun go down on your anger." And if you're already arguing after it's dark, does it really does it apply?
Right. The sun's already down. Perfect. She's going to like that.
Yeah.
So I do think that you should not argue tired and don't drag it out all night. I think we did that a little bit when we were first married, and you just end up exhausted and you just don't get anywhere. It's not good.
Yeah, and letting the sun go down on your anger, what happens a lot of times with that is the next day you've slept, you're refreshed, and here's one of the big things with that. It's very easy to just not talk through kind of the root problem maybe of the conversation. One of the things that I say a lot to people is let's say your spouse gets upset or mad with you about leaving clothes on the floor. And I've used this in counseling sessions with people and coaching sessions with people. I'll ask this question: are they mad about the clothes on the floor? And almost always people say, yes, that's what they're arguing about. And I say, no, you have to go deeper, because the deeper thing is if it means so much to them to have no clothes on the floor, or have you put your clothes in laundry, by leaving them still on the floor or doing that habitually, what you're telling them is that you don't respect them. So it's showing disrespect for things that they value. Now, it doesn't mean that there's not compromise in seasons of life and all those different things, but there's always usually a deeper conversation going on when you get into different arguments with your spouse.
Right. And the longer that we've been married, the more we're able to kind of snap out of it and kind of look at each other and say, okay, what's really going on here? What are you really upset about? Because it's not the fact that the clothes weren't dry in the dryer or something like that. Like something else is going on here. Yeah,
like just this past week when we had to put Bo down, I had to, because of work schedules and children and stuff, I was the one that had to go do this at 11 o'clock in the morning by myself, and which was fine. I volunteered to do it. I said that would be fine. I would go ahead and take care of that. And then at the end of the day, Jennifer comes home, and I was working on projects in our backyard, and I was just grumpy. I was grumpy, and I kind of snapped at her a couple times. And she's like, hey, what's your problem? And then, she goes inside. She's like, well, I'm not, I don't want to talk with you if you're going to be grumpy. And then I kind of snapped out of it, and I walked inside, and I kind of just recapped how I was feeling emotionally. I was just sad. I was bummed. I felt like it was just a sad, sad day. And she was trying to connect with me at the end of her day. And I had already processed all of these emotions that I was feeling from losing my dog.
Yeah, and I was walking into a home without him, and so I was really sad and, kind of wanting to talk about that. And so we had to kind of like stop for a minute and say, okay, here's what we're really feeling. It's not because it's, I don't know, hot out. It's not because supper's not ready. It's not these other little irritating things that are happening. What's really happening is we're both really sad about the dog, and we need to just sit down and talk about that.
Yeah, we were grieving. Is really what, and we're still grieving.
Right.
It was difficult. So not letting the sun go down on your anger is a huge piece to winning every argument, because when we talk about winning, we're talking about who can move the quickest in an argument to restore communication, to restore the relationship, to restore really what it means to unconditionally love one another. It is huge. So the next thing with that...
Well, and can I say, too, that so by winning, you're both winning. It's not a win for you personally. It's you both win.
Right. Yeah, it's not... So with that, if you're not letting the sun go down in your anger, that means that you're working through something. So let's say you're in the heat of the argument, one of the best next thing you can do is seek to understand their point of view. Meaning, even if you disagree, ask questions like this. Help me understand where you're coming from. Help me understand what you mean by that. When you got angry about this, what were you feeling? And it's tough to do when you're kind of, angry at each other. And I would encourage you too that Jennifer and I never yell or scream or shout or it's more or less just tense discussion. And if you find yourself screaming and shouting and throwing things, I encourage you as a couple to immediately get into some sort of counseling to talk through those things, because that reaction, I would bet money on it that the deeper things is there's bitterness and there's resentment and there's things in your heart that I think God really wants to heal and deal with. And that's one of the biggest things that I was saying before about not letting the sun go down your anger, that if you wake up and you just kind of brush over the argument you had the night before and don't really talk about the deeper things, that's what really leads to the bitterness and resentment. So really seeking to understand and trying to listen, not just with your ears, but with your heart, and being able to say, okay, help me really feel what they're feeling. And there's a difference between empathy and sympathy. Sympathy is wanting to kind of connect, but empathy is really knowing and trying and being able to know how they feel. And maybe empathy is like you've experienced that yourself. So you're experiencing sympathy and empathy, all these different things all at the same time, and seeking to understand. So, but as we are not letting the sun go down on our anger, as we're seeking to understand, I would say the next thing is really being quick to forgive. And forgive. There's a big difference between forgiveness and forgetting and ignoring the problem. That forgiveness says that I have a willingness to forgive. So you want to touch on that?
Well, just to say that I think the whole forgive and forget is baloney. Mm-hmm. We're not created to forget. We have a memory. We have a mind. We remember. The
question is if we hold on to that memory as bitterness and resentment, or we hold on to that memory as and use that as a tool in our communication next time to understand how each other just functions as a human being and how we show our emotion. And that could be a tool. That memory can be a tool to know, okay, I remember the last time you reacted this way. It's because you were feeling this way. And it's a way it becomes a tool rather than a lot of times we will remember things and we keep that as like an arsenal,
Right. And that's when I think you're supposed to forget. It's not to go back and hold it over someone or remind them or, that sort of thing. But this whole idea, just forgive and forget, it's hard. I just don't think it works that way.
And what we're talking about, how to win every argument, and talking about these different pieces of forgiveness and not letting the sun go down in your anger, and trying to understand where the other person's coming from. Those kind of pieces. We're not talking about, really deep-seated things like maybe infidelity or some huge thing in your marriage. If those things, you need a professional counselor to help you work through.
Well, and can I just say on that too, so many people act like counseling, oh, we had to go to counseling, and it's this big horrible thing. But if you think about it, you haven't been through that situation before. So how in the world do you have the tools to navigate that situation when it's completely new to you as a couple? And sometimes you just need a third party that's like, they've helped other couples through that. And so they have the tools that they're able to teach you on how to navigate that. Casey and I, we have done some very in-depth counseling years ago. And what it did was it just gave us this whole big toolbox that now we don't have those big arguments. We don't have all of those big things because we took care of all of that. We went through all of our big, like, hot button issues kind of, and now we just know how to navigate. And so now, if you picture before we were in this big, like white water rafting, and you're in these big rapids and everything, and these big rocks are coming up and it throws you out of the boat, we just couldn't navigate it. And now I would say we're more in this peaceful stream where sometimes there'll be a rock or a pebble and we can easily navigate our boat around that because we know how to steer the boat.
Exactly.
We have the tools to do that. So,
exactly.
And that's what counseling does for you.
Yeah, and we're not saying that by any means that we have everything figured out today, and but that's not what we're saying at all. But and that's the thing, that it's an ongoing process of leaning on people that have been where you haven't been is huge to that. So, talking about not letting the sun go down on your anger, being able to understand where the other person is coming from, being quick to forgive. These are all amazing tools when it comes to winning every argument. And I would like to go with the next one is that allow your marriage to be 100%, 100% for each other. And here's what I mean. That this is it's kind of like eating healthy. It's a preventative way to stave. Is that the word? Stave off?
Yeah. I think that's a word.
To stave off possible coming arguments. And here's what I mean by that, is if you ask someone, is marriage 50-50? Like, well, yeah. Well, actually, marriage is not 50-50. Marriage is 100%, 100%, meaning that as individuals, we're called to give 100% of ourselves to a relationship without the expectation of the return of the other person. Now, this is really, really hard because we all need things from our spouse. But when we go in with the mindset of I'm giving 100%, meaning I'm going to work to, as a husband, I'm going to work to serve my wife. I'm going to work to bless her and encourage her and seek her best and love her unconditionally the best I can as a human being. I'm going to work to whatever, X, Y, or Z, whatever's on your list, but that it's 100% that is your focus. Then, because I was just talking with someone the other night that I said that you can't do something with strings attached. Otherwise, you're not really giving. You're not really loving. What you're doing is you're manipulating. So, and if you're doing something to hopefully get some sort of response, if you do something positive and hoping to get some sort of positive response, and if they don't respond the way that you want to, then you're bitter, you're angry, or whatever. You're not really giving in the first place. So the last thing of this topic that we want to talk about is really giving 100% in your marriage.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, nothing to add to that?
No.
Okay. So the home piece, we've been, like I said, we've been working on these different projects. One of the things that we wanted to touch on with the home part of Home Health and Happiness is we have some fun new products that we're going to have at this Iowa gathering, and also down at Skeleton Key, and also on our website to where you can see this, is we now have the ability to be able to do these word signs that you can do custom, like your last name or maybe words that are important to you. And we'll post some pictures of that on our Instagram and Facebook of what we can do, but we'll be able to custom make these things for you and your family.
Now, if you like the word happy, we cannot do that today because Nora ate it. She ate happy.
Or ate happy. Yeah.
So happy's out. I think we have choose. So you could choose.
Choose, yeah. So
but not choose happy.
We ordered some custom phrases that for these signs that we're going to make for the Iowa gathering. One of them was choose happy.
And Nora just ate the happy.
Ate the happy part. So I guess the happiness piece that maybe she's speaking something to us is that every day we should eat happy. We should
happy
choose to
and
eat,
just choose.
And just choose happy and eat it. Make it a part of who you are. So anyways, hey, that's our thought on how to win every argument with your spouse, and we hope it added value to you. We would love to hear how you argue in your relationship and get feedback from you. We love your tools and tips that you guys use. And also, one of the things that we do at the K Plus J Living Company is we love to connect with couples that are struggling in their relationship. And if you need to do some phone coaching, we have that available, and we would love to be able to connect with you on that. You can just email us, contact at kjliving.company. And also, if you're enjoying this podcast, we'd love for you to hop on iTunes and rate this podcast, because it helps it go up in the ratings, but also that not only helps us, but it also helps us reach more people so we can help them design a meaningful home, better health, and more happiness. So we will talk to you next week, folks. See ya.